The salt-laced wind whipped a stray strand of hair across my eyes as I stepped out of the hired car, the air heavy with the scent of distant diesel and an underlying dampness. Above me, the sky was a bruised purple threatening rain. This island, a speck on the map, was known more for its tax havens than its weather, and certainly not for the kind of work that brought me here. I pulled my jacket tighter, the fabric offering little resistance against the chill that seemed to seep into my bones. The building loomed, a stark modernist block of smoked glass and polished steel, utterly out of place against the rugged coastline. This was it. The offshore law office with shred bins and locked safes. Its very facade screamed impenetrable, a fortress of secrets. I had seen enough of these structures to know their outward austerity often masked an internal chaos, or at least a carefully managed one. A uniformed security officer, broad-shouldered and unsmiling, met me at the entrance. His gaze was scrutinizing, assessing, as if I were a particularly complex package that needed to be sorted. "You must be Raj," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. "That's me," I confirmed, offering a curt nod. My eyes swept past him, taking in the sterile lobby, the polished marble reflecting the dim overhead lighting. Every surface gleamed. Every corner seemed to have been meticulously wiped clean. Too clean, perhaps. It always made me wary when a scene felt too tidy. "The senior partner is waiting," the officer said, gesturing towards a pair of imposing double doors. He didn't offer to escort me, merely pointed, his stance suggesting he was eager to return to his post, a sentinel guarding against unseen threats. I understood. My presence here was an intrusion, a disruption to their carefully constructed veneer of order. Beyond the doors, a woman in a sharp gray suit stood beside a large mahogany desk. Her face was tight, her posture rigid, a clear indicator of her discomfort. This was the senior partner, a woman whose name I'd been given but had already filed away under roll. He clasped his hands in front of him, knuckles white. "Raj," he began, his voice strained. "Thank you for coming so quickly. This is unprecedented for us. My understanding is that your colleague, Mr. Elias Vance, has been missing for 48 hours, I stated, cutting to the chase. I didn't need platitudes. I needed facts, untainted by PR spin. And that his office, specifically, is the focus. She flinched at the mention of the name, a brief flicker of something unreadable. Fear? Annoyance? Crossing her features? Yes. Elias. He simply vanished. His car is still in the garage. His personal effects are here. But he's gone. She waved a hand vaguely around the opulent office, a space designed for power and discretion. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, interspersed with framed legal documents and abstract art. A large window offered a panoramic view of the choppy sea. And no one has seen him since late Tuesday afternoon? I pressed, my gaze sweeping over the desk, the untouched pen set, the neatly stacked papers. That's correct. He had a late meeting, then was expected to fly out early Wednesday. But he never checked in. She wrung her hands. We've been through everything. Nothing is disturbed. No forced entry. No sign of struggle. That's what concerns me, I murmured, more to myself than to her. The absence of evidence is often evidence in itself. I moved towards the desk, pulling on a pair of thin nitrile gloves. The air in the room felt heavy, stagnant, despite the impressive view. I could almost taste the fear, the desperation to maintain control. We have strict protocols here, the senior partner continued, her voice regaining some of its professional edge. Security is paramount. All sensitive documents are either locked in the safes or immediately processed through the shred bins. She gestured towards a row of heavy-duty industrial shredders, their hungry mouths gaping. Then to a series of formidable gray metal safes built into the wall. It's all accounted for. I nodded slowly, my eyes scanning the floor. But it couldn't hide everything. I knelt, my fingers brushing the plush pile near the corner of the large executive desk. It wasn't the usual office grime, nor was it carpet lint. It possessed a peculiar, almost metallic sheen. "What is that?" the senior partner asked, leaning forward slightly, her initial composure cracking. I didn't answer immediately. I gently collected a sample with a sterile swab, placing it into a small, sealed vial. My mind was already working, sifting through possibilities. This wasn't dust from the shred bins, nor from any common office material. It was too fine, too luminous. It felt out of place, a single discordant note in an otherwise meticulously orchestrated symphony of corporate tidiness. I stood, turning my attention to the nearest shred bin. Its contents were a fine, illegible confetti of paper, exactly as expected. But as I leaned closer, my gaze fell upon the exterior of the bin, near its base. A faint, almost imperceptible smear. It looked like oil, but with a strange, almost organic quality to its color. It didn't match anything I'd seen in the office so far. Not the lubricants for the shredders, not the cleaning supplies, not even the ink from the printers. "This," I said, pointing to the smear, my voice low, "is not accounted for." The senior partner's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine alarm replacing her earlier guardedness. She took an involuntary step back, as if the bin itself had suddenly become contaminated. The tension in the room thickened, palpable. Her eyes, usually sharp and calculating, now held a raw, unvarnished fear that snagged my attention more effectively than any shouted warning. The air, already heavy with the scent of recycled paper and expensive cleaning agents, seemed to thicken, pressing in. "What is it?" I asked, my voice low, but the question felt unnecessary. The answer, or at least a fragment of it, was staring at us from the mouth of the industrial shred bin. The senior partner didn't respond directly. Instead, her gaze darted from the bin to my face, then to the closed door of her private office. This is not right, Raj," he finally managed, his tone hushed, almost a whisper. "It shouldn't be here." I took a step closer to the bin, ignoring her protest. The metallic glint I'd seen earlier wasn't just a trick of the light. Wedged amongst the confetti of shredded documents, caught on one of the jagged teeth of the mechanism, was something undeniably foreign. It wasn't paper, nor was it a stray staple or a paperclip. Its surface was dark, almost obsidian, and it reflected the overhead fluorescence with a dull, unsettling sheen. It was small, no larger than my thumbnail, irregularly shaped, like a shard of something broken. She took another step back, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "That bin. It's for sensitive documents only. Cleared personnel, everything logged." Her reaction was disproportionate, even for someone meticulous about office protocols. This wasn't about a breach of procedure. It was about something far more visceral. I pulled the small object free. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, dense and cool against my skin. The senior partner averted her gaze. I don't know, but it's not from here. Nothing like that should ever be found in this office, especially not in a shred bin." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the controlled facade she usually maintained. "This facility is secure, impenetrable." Her insistence on the office's security, its impenetrability, felt like a desperate incantation against an encroaching reality. I turned the fragment over in my palm. The striations became clearer, almost like a fingerprint, unique and deliberate. This wasn't a natural formation. Just as I was about to examine it further, a faint rhythmic thrumming began, vibrating through the floor. It was a low, insistent pulse, barely audible at first, but growing steadily louder. "What is that?" I asked, looking towards the window overlooking the docks. This sound was an intrusion. The thrumming intensified, accompanied by a distant, high-pitched whine. It wasn't a ship's horn, nor the groan of cargo cranes. It was something faster, more urgent. The senior partner rushed to the window, peering out. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. "No," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "They're here, already?" I moved to her side, looking out. Its design was unlike anything I'd seen in civilian use, angular, almost predatory. They moved with a practiced, unsettling synchronicity, carrying cases that glinted dully in the afternoon sun. The reveal of this fragment, combined with the senior partner's reaction, had already painted a picture of something clandestine. But the arrival of this team elevated it to another level entirely. This wasn't just about a misplaced object. It was about a pursuit. The senior partner turned from the window, her face pale, her composure completely shattered. Her eyes, now frantic, met mine. "They're the retrievers," she stammered, her gaze flickering to the shred bin, then to the fragment in my hand. "They've come for it." The fragment in my hand felt suddenly much heavier, a tangible piece of a dangerous puzzle. The game, I realized, had just escalated. My grip tightened on the dark shard. I turned the shard over, letting the fluorescent lights of the deserted office catch its surface. It wasn't just a piece of broken glass or plastic. Its weight was disproportionate to its size, a dense, almost ceramic-like material, uniformly dark without a hint of transparency. No sharp edges either, but a clean, almost deliberate fracture. I brought it closer, squinting. This wasn't debris. This was a component, a highly specialized one, judging by its composition and the intricate, barely discernible patterns. This was Reveal 3. Whoever had been here before me wasn't just looking for documents. They were looking for, or had just destroyed, something crucial. And this shard was the only thing left. Every sound in this place felt amplified, stretched thin. A low, almost imperceptible thump echoed from the direction of the main entrance corridor, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very floor. My head snapped up, my senses immediately on high alert. I'd swept the main floor, or so I'd thought. I'd been meticulous. Now it wasn't. I moved, not with panic, but with the controlled urgency of a predator sensing another in its territory. I slid behind a tall stack of archived files, the dust motes dancing in the slivers of light that cut through the gaps. From my vantage point, I could see the polished marble of the reception area. The thump came again, closer this time, accompanied by the faint scrape of leather on stone. Someone was moving with purpose, not stealth, but with a confident stride. A figure emerged into the reception area, silhouetted against the muted glow from the streetlights filtering through the frosted glass entrance. It was a man, broad-shouldered, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of training. He wasn't a casual visitor. He was searching. And his search was methodical, his eyes lingering on the very areas I had just examined. The shattered console, the overturned chair. My breath hitched, a small, involuntary gasp that I immediately swallowed. The man paused, his head tilting almost imperceptibly. Had he heard me? The air crackled with a sudden, suffocating tension. My mind raced, assessing angles, exits, potential cover. The shred bins, usually a source of industrial noise, were silent. The locked safes, usually symbols of impenetrable security, now felt like potential traps. The man took another step, his gaze now fixed on the section of the office where I'd been working. He moved with a predatory grace, his footsteps barely audible. He was closing in. I could feel the tremor in my muscles, the rush of adrenaline sharpening my focus. This wasn't just about finding clues anymore. This was about survival. The game had not just escalated, it had become a hunt, and I was the prey. I turned the shard over, the cold, smooth surface pressing into my palm. It wasn't glass, not exactly. Too dense, too dark, absorbing the faint ambient light rather than reflecting it. Obsidian-like, perhaps, but with an unnatural, uniform texture that spoke of synthetic origins. A fragment, certainly, But of what? The air in the deserted office hung heavy, thick with the scent of old paper and the metallic tang of ozone from the photocopiers. I was alone, or so I believed. My gaze swept across the meticulously organized space, past the rows of locked safes that lined one wall, past the humming shred bins waiting for their daily diet of sensitive documents. My initial sweep had been thorough, but this shard, this unexpected piece of evidence, suggested a deeper layer, a secret that had been missed. I knelt again, examining the precise spot where the shard had rested. It led, subtly, towards one of the larger, older shred bins. This particular model was industrial grade, designed to pulverize everything from paper to hard drives. My hand hovered over its steel lid, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. Had the shard been ejected from it, or was it merely a marker? A sudden, sharp thud echoed from deeper within the office, originating from the direction of the main vault room. It wasn't the settling of the building. This was distinct, heavy, and undeniably recent. My breath hitched. I wasn't alone. Or, more unsettlingly, someone had been here, and I was trailing them by mere moments. The game had not just escalated. It had taken on a new, immediate dimension. My training kicked in, overriding the surge of adrenaline. I moved, not blindly, but with a hunter's caution. Each step was deliberate. My weight shifted to minimize sound. The shard remained clutched in my hand, a strange comfort, a weapon perhaps, or a key. I passed the reception area, the conference rooms, each door slightly ajar, revealing nothing but empty chairs and polished tables. The vault room door, a thick slab of reinforced steel, stood partially open. I pushed it further with the tip of my boot, careful not to touch the handle, my eyes scanning for any sign of disturbance. Inside, rows of massive bolted-down safes lined the walls. Most were sealed tight, their combination dials unmolested. But one, nestled in a recessed alcove, stood slightly ajar, its heavy door ajar by perhaps an inch. A wave of frustration mixed with grim satisfaction washed over me. Someone had been here. Someone had beaten me to it, or had been interrupted. I approached the compromised safe, my senses on high alert for any lingering presence. The safe's interior was not entirely empty. A single, small, highly polished device lay nestled on a velvet lining, a stark contrast to the rough-hewn interior. It was a data drive, certainly, but unlike any commercial model I had ever encountered. Sleek, black, and almost impossibly thin, it possessed a unique, angular design. My eyes fixated on a small, jagged indentation on its side. A piece was missing. A perfect, precise fit. I slowly lifted the shard from my palm, my fingers trembling slightly. With painstaking care, I aligned the shard with the indentation on the data drive. It slotted into place with a faint, almost inaudible click, sealing the device, making it whole. Reveal 4. The shard wasn't just a fragment of something. It was an integral component, a physical key. And this device, now complete, wasn't merely a data drive. Etched faintly into the newly formed surface, visible only now that the piece was whole, was a complex interlocking symbol. A crest I recognized from the obscure, almost mythical financial institution mentioned in the periphery of my initial case files. This was a bespoke encryption key, a master access token for a system far more secure and far more critical than I had imagined. It was designed to look like debris, a discarded piece of trash, until it found its other half. My mind reeled. This wasn't about documents or money laundering anymore. This was about access, about control over something profoundly significant, hidden behind layers of digital and physical security. The person who had dropped this shard, who had left this device, was playing a game of incredibly high stakes. The faint thud I had heard. Had they just finished their work? Or had they been forced to leave it behind, a desperate, accidental breadcrumb? I carefully picked up the now complete device. It felt strangely warm in my hand, humming with a latent energy. My presence here was no longer a quiet investigation. It was a confrontation. I had found the key. Now I just needed to know what door it opened and who else was looking for it. The hunt had just begun. The shard of dark, synthetic material rested in my evidence pouch, a constant, abrasive presence against my thoughts. Its obsidian-like density, its unnatural texture. Every examination had yielded the same conclusion. Manufactured, deliberate, and utterly unlike anything I'd encountered. But a microscopic striation, a near-invisible pattern on its otherwise featureless surface, had given me a lead. It wasn't a logo, not exactly, but a signature. A specific manufacturing imprint that had been cross-referenced against a database of obscure industrial patents and, unexpectedly, a legal dispute in an old financial journal. The trail led here. It was situated on the 10th floor of a glass and steel monolith, a building that seemed to float above the city's ceaseless hum. The lobby was a symphony of hushed affluence, polished marble floors reflecting the muted glow of recessed lighting, the scent of expensive cleaning agents mingling with faint hints of roasted coffee. A receptionist, impeccably dressed and radiating an aura of practiced indifference, sat behind a dark wood desk, her eyes scanning the arrivals with a predatory efficiency. I, however, wasn't an arrival. I'd used a borrowed access card, one that granted me entry as a scheduled late-night maintenance technician. A prearranged, highly irregular visit to inspect the air filtration system on the 10th floor. My cover story was thin, fragile as old parchment, but it was all I had. Each floor clicked past, the numbers a countdown to potential exposure. Stepping out, the corridor was deserted, stretching into an empty, hushed expanse. The office entrance itself was a heavy, frosted glass door, bearing only a discreet engraved nameplate. Inside, the air was still, pregnant with the ghosts of confidential agreements and hushed transactions. The ubiquitous shred bins, steel sentinels of forgotten data, stood sentinel beside every desk, their hungry mouths ready to devour any incriminating paper. My target was clear: the senior partner's office, identified through a prior illicit glance at the floor plan. The intelligence suggested a specific safe within that office held records related to the manufacturing entity I was tracking. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to even, my movements to be precise. The partner's office was larger, more opulent, dominated by a massive mahogany desk and a wall of leather-bound law books. Behind the desk, partially obscured by a framed degree, was what I was looking for. A heavy, recessed wall safe. The digital keypad gleamed faintly in my light. I pulled out a small, specialized toolkit, my fingers moving with practiced expertise. The pressure was immense. I bypassed the first layer of encryption, then the second. My brow beaded with sweat, the smell of ozone from the electronics filling my nostrils. A faint clatter from the hallway. My body tensed, every muscle locking. I froze, listening. A cleaning cart. The sound of rubber wheels on polished tile growing fainter as it passed. I let out a slow, silent breath, my fingers resuming their intricate dance. The final click was almost imperceptible. A soft, mechanical sigh. Inside, among stacks of legal documents and bound ledgers, I found it. A slim, unassuming file, tucked behind a thick, red tape-bound contract. The file's tab was blank. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled it free, flipping it open. The first page was a corporate registration document, riddled with shell companies and nested ownership structures, all designed to obscure. But then, on the third page, a small handwritten note in the margin, dated years ago. Refer to Project Chimera, Synaptic Materials, Inc. Synaptic Materials, Inc. The name hit me like a physical blow. It was a company I'd never heard of, not in any public database. But the context, the casual, almost dismissive handwriting, suggested a deep, inherent connection. The synthetic shard, the unusual striation, it all clicked. This was the source, the manufacturer. And the name itself, Synaptic, hinted at something beyond mere industrial fabrication. It suggested a deliberate, almost biological precision in its design. This wasn't just a material. It was engineered. I photographed the document, then several others within the file, before carefully returning it, ensuring the safe looked undisturbed. This wasn't just about a single peculiar fragment anymore. It was about an entire operation, hidden behind layers of legal obfuscation. As I began to close the safe door, a sharp metallic clack echoed through the silent office. Not from the safe, but from the corridor outside the partner's office. A door. Someone was here. I was exposed. The faint gleam of light under the partner's door shifted, then solidified. I pulled the safe door shut with a soft click, my fingers fumbling for the keypad to re-engage the lock. Time had just evaporated. I was no longer a ghost in the machine. I was trapped. It was a company I'd never heard of, not in any public database, but the context, the casual, almost dismissive handwriting, suggested a deep, inherent connection. This was the source, not just of the material, but of the entire twisted operation. The anonymous note, the subtle chemical residue, now this. It wasn't just a simple case of a manufactured component. It was a deliberate, concealed enterprise. The urgency in my gut intensified. If this company was so adept at staying hidden, finding them through traditional channels would be a dead end. I needed to go deeper, into the shadows where such entities typically operated. Offshore, legal fronts, shell corporations, the usual suspects for the unusually discreet. I spent the next few hours in a digital dive, cross-referencing the faint corporate registration numbers I'd found on a discarded shipping label, barely legible, almost erased, with the limited public records available for the kind of obscure, non-filing entities that often served as legal veils. It was like sifting through static for a whisper. Not a warehouse, not a factory, but the administrative heart of the operation. That made sense. Control the paper, control the narrative. Deliveries, cleaning crews, a steady stream of lawyers and assistants entering and leaving, their faces blank with professional detachment. Standard security, card readers, cameras, a single bored-looking security officer at a minimalist reception desk. My entry would have to be precise. Just before midnight, as the last of the office workers departed and the cleaning crew began their rounds, I made my move. A quick, practiced bypass of the access panel, and I was inside, the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial cleaner filling the air. The office interior was as sterile and impersonal as I'd expected. Long, silent corridors, doors marked with corporate names I didn't recognize. The faint whir of air conditioning was the only sound. I moved with a practiced fluidity, my footsteps silent on the thick carpet. I knew what I was looking for. Anything that linked this law office to Synaptic Materials, Inc. Anything that explained the synthetic shard. I found the floor plan tacked to a maintenance closet door, a useful map. The most secure areas, the ones with the largest concentrations of shred bins and locked safes, were on the 3rd floor. I took the service stairs, each step echoing slightly in the quiet building, a constant reminder of the risk. The 3rd floor was different. Heavier doors, fewer offices, more storage rooms. I could hear the distant, rhythmic whir thump of a heavy-duty industrial shredder. They were busy. I found the main records vault, its steel door thick and unyielding. Standard electronic lock, backed by a mechanical tumbler. Not impossible, but time-consuming. I needed something faster, something less obvious. Then I saw it. A small, unmarked office door tucked away in a dimly lit corner. No corporate name, no lawyer's title. Just a blank, beige surface. My instincts screamed. This was it. The lock was a simple key card, easily replicated with the right equipment. A few silent minutes of work, and the latch clicked. Inside, the office was Spartan. No computers, no personal effects, just documents. and a single, small, reinforced safe built into the wall. I went straight for the cabinets, standard locks. I worked quickly, my fingers adept, my senses heightened. The metallic scent was stronger here, almost a phantom of the shard itself. The first 2 cabinets yielded only boilerplate legal documents. The third, however, held something different. They weren't for a building or a product. They were anatomical. Diagrams of the human brain, overlaid with intricate, almost organic-looking circuits. This wasn't just about manufacturing a material. It was about implanting it. The synthetic shard wasn't just a component. It was designed for biological integration. They was not just a producer, but an enabler of a terrifying, invasive technology. They weren't just making the parts. They were making the tools for a profound, unprecedented form of manipulation. This wasn't about data or commerce anymore. This was about minds. A sudden, sharp clack from the corridor outside snapped me back to reality. A door closing, too loud, too close. I froze, the schematics clutched in my hand, the metallic tang in the air suddenly feeling less phantom, more real. I wasn't alone. The cold certainty of the previous discovery had burrowed deep, a parasitic thought feeding on my composure. Biological integration. It wasn't just a hypothesis anymore. It was the horrifying truth. They wasn't merely manufacturing a product. They were engineering a future I couldn't comprehend. A future where human biology was a canvas for their synthetic shards. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. The trail, thin but undeniable, led me to a single obscure entity mentioned in a heavily redacted financial ledger I'd managed to retrieve from a discarded server rack at Synaptic's deserted facility. A shell corporation, registered in a jurisdiction notorious for its impenetrable secrecy. Its only tangible presence, a single anonymous address. My instinct screamed legal laundering, a deliberate obfuscation of intent. Hours later, under the shroud of a moonless sky, I found myself standing before the imposing obsidian glass facade of an establishment that screamed discretion from every polished surface. This was the address. I located the service entrance, a less conspicuous steel door tucked away in an alley reeking of stale rain and exhaust fumes. The lock, a sophisticated biometric model, proved a challenge, but not an insurmountable one. My fingers, practiced and precise, danced across the scanner, a faint hum confirming my bypass. The heavy door swung inward with a faint sigh, revealing a dimly lit corridor. The interior was a stark contrast to the opulence suggested by the exterior. Functional, sterile, devoid of personal touches. My footsteps echoed on the polished concrete floors as I moved through a labyrinth of identical cubicles. Each desk cleared, each monitor dark. The air hung heavy with the scent of ozone and old paper. My target, I knew, wouldn't be in the open. I was looking for the heart of their operations, the place where secrets were guarded most fiercely. I found it on the 3rd floor, behind a reinforced door marked only with a numeric code panel. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on filing cabinets stacked shoulder high. 2 industrial-grade shred bins stood sentinel near a large, empty conference table, their gaping mouths testament to the volume of information they consumed. This was where the real intelligence lay. My gaze settled on the largest safe, its surface unscratched, its locking mechanism more intricate than the others. A hunch, a gut feeling born of years spent dissecting the clandestine operations of the powerful, told me this was it. I ran my gloved fingers over the cold metal, feeling for any anomalies, any subtle give. Time stretched, each click a tiny victory, each resistance a momentary frustration. Finally, with a soft, resonant thud, the heavy door swung open. Inside, neatly stacked, were not bundles of cash but binders and thick manila folders. I pulled out the top binder, its cover devoid of any identifying marks. This was it. The very first document detailed an operation, not a material. They was explicitly named as the primary material supplier, but the project itself was spearheaded by a consortium of shell corporations, all funneling through this very law office. The biological integration wasn't a terrifying possibility. It was an active, ongoing reality. I was halfway through a particularly dense section detailing post-integration monitoring protocols when a faint, metallic clink echoed from the floor below. It wasn't the ventilation system. It was distinct, sharp. Someone else was in the building. I froze listening, straining to differentiate the building's ambient sounds from genuine intrusion. Another sound, closer this time, a soft scuff, unmistakable. Footsteps. They were ascending the stairs. My window of opportunity was closing rapidly. I had to move, and quickly. I grabbed the entire binder, tucking it under my arm, and swiftly extracted a handful of the most critical-looking folders from the safe. My exit strategy, meticulously planned, now needed to be executed with an urgency I hadn't anticipated. The game had just escalated. Biological integration. They wasn't merely manufacturing a product. They were engineering a future I could barely stomach. My mind churned, the implications expanding like a malignant growth. This wasn't about enhancing. It was about replacing. About control on a fundamental cellular level. The sheer audacity of it left a bitter taste. A flicker on my encrypted comms, a single, untraceable ping from an anonymous source I'd cultivated over years, cut through the noise in my head. A cryptic message. The ledger, offshore, today, before it's dust. No sender, no subject, just the coordinates. My gut tightened. They were cleaning house. Whatever the ledger referred to, it was critical. I moved with a practiced urgency, shedding the shadows of the abandoned factory for the sterile, sun-drenched facade of a financial district. Inside, the air conditioning hummed a constant, almost imperceptible drone, and the scent of expensive cleaning products mingled with the faint aroma of stale coffee. Every surface gleamed, reflecting my own harried image back at me. This place was designed to radiate an impenetrable sense of order, to repel intrusion. I watched the ebb and flow of personnel from a discreet corner cafe across the plaza. Lawyers in crisp suits, administrative staff with harried expressions, security guards with eyes that missed nothing. My window of opportunity would be narrow, a sliver of time when the building's rhythm faltered. It came during the lunch rush, when a surge of people heading out momentarily overwhelmed the single turnstile. I slipped in behind a group of boisterous junior associates, my forged ID card a blur against the scanner. The guard at the main desk, distracted by a phone call, barely glanced up. My target floor was the 7th. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow, each ascending floor a beat of a drum against my ribs. My anonymous tip hadn't specified a room, only the ledger and the urgency. There was nothing explicit. A faint mechanical whirring emanated from within. Shred bins. My source was precise. I pushed the door open, stepping into a narrow, dimly lit space lined with filing cabinets and industrial-sized shredders. The metallic tang of ozone hung heavy in the air. A single office manager, a woman with severe spectacles perched on her nose, was feeding a stack of documents into one of the machines, her back to me. Davies from Synaptic Materials. I held up a blank, official-looking envelope, hoping the name would resonate. The office manager paused, her hands hovering over the next stack. She turned, her gaze sharp, assessing. Mr. Davies? We don't have a Mr. Davies here. My eyes followed. They were marked with a small, stylized S logo. I was given this address. I gestured vaguely at my phone. As I spoke, I subtly moved closer to the trolley, my hand brushing against a partially shredded document that had fallen to the floor. It was a single sheet, torn vertically, but enough remained for me to glimpse a few crucial lines. The office manager turned back to her shredder, clearly annoyed by the interruption. You should check with reception downstairs. They handle all deliveries. As she resumed feeding documents, I bent down, pretending to tie my shoelace. My fingers closed around the fragment. The paper was thick, expensive. I tucked it into my palm, my heart hammering against my ribs. I straightened, offered another apologetic nod, and retreated, my pace unhurried until I was out of her sight. I didn't stop until I was in the relative anonymity of the main plaza, finding refuge on a bench, pretending to scroll through my phone. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the fragment. The fragment contained a list of names, not of scientists or engineers, but of high-ranking government officials, corporate executives, and influential media figures. They wasn't just building a future. They were installing it, one influential mind at a time. The dates were recent, some mere days old. The implications were staggering. The biological integration wasn't just a concept. It was already active, deep within the highest echelons of power. My hands clenched around the paper, crushing it slightly. I was no longer just investigating a crime. I was racing against an invisible coup. The glow of the screen cast a pallid light on my face, mirroring the cold dread coiling in my gut. Reveal 8 had been a punch to the diaphragm. Active deployment, not just manufacturing. The dates stared back at me, some barely hours old. The biological integration wasn't some theoretical concept. It was a horrifying reality, already in motion. A targeted neuroagent, designed to subtly alter cognitive function, to sway decisions without detection. My fingers, still trembling slightly, navigated the digital archives. Each click felt like detonating a small charge in the silence. The air in the office, usually still, seemed to thicken, pressing in on me. I scanned the document for any further clues, any detail that could explain the how and who behind this insidious campaign. Financial ledgers, shell corporations, encrypted communication logs, a labyrinth designed to obscure, not illuminate. The locked safes, built into the reinforced concrete walls, offered no immediate answers, only further questions about what they might contain. A faint hum reached me, a vibration through the floorboards. It wasn't the building's HVAC. My head snapped up. The sound seemed to originate from the main server room just down the hall. A quick glance at the clock on the wall. 03:17. Too early for cleaning staff, too late for legitimate business. This wasn't a coincidence. They were coming. Or worse, they were already here, initiating some automated process. I slammed my hand onto the keyboard, forcing my attention back to the screen. My eyes darted across a freshly opened file marked Phase 2, Activation Protocol. The title alone sent a jolt of ice through my veins. My gaze locked onto a section detailing target profiles. Not just influential, but critical. A list of names, positions, and precise activation windows. A global summit, scheduled for tomorrow. The key players, the ones shaping international policy, were all on this list. And then, a single horrifying line. Synchronized deployment via aerosolized vector, 08 Dur UTC. My gut twisted into a knot. The implications were immediate and devastating. This wasn't just about influencing a few minds. This was about hijacking the very decision-making apparatus of global power. The hum intensified, now accompanied by a faint whirring sound, like industrial fans spinning up. It echoed off the polished floors and glass partitions of the office. My time was running out. Any attempt to email or upload would be instantly flagged, traced, and shut down. A long shot, but perhaps the system wasn't entirely air-gapped from external drives, especially if it was used for occasional data transfers by authorized personnel. I fumbled in my bag for the encrypted drive I always carried. My fingers felt clumsy, thick with adrenaline. I plugged it in, watching the screen with bated breath. A small icon appeared. Recognition. Hope, sharp and dangerous, pricked through the fear. The whirring grew louder, closer. I could hear distinct clicks now, like relays engaging, and the faint scent of ozone began to permeate the air. They were initiating a system-wide purge, Or perhaps a lockdown. I had mere minutes, maybe seconds. I selected the Phase 2 file, along with the logs detailing the initial Reveal 8 deployments, and dragged them to the USB drive icon. The progress bar crawled. A new sound, distinct from the machinery, reached me. A faint thump from the corridor. Someone was moving. A human presence. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the impending discovery. I pulled the drive out the instant the progress bar vanished, barely waiting for the safe to remove notification. There was no time for safe. I shoved the drive into my pocket, the cold metal a small comfort. My mind raced. I couldn't just walk out. The building would be sealed. I needed an exit, a distraction, anything. My gaze fell upon the shred bins again. They were industrial grade, designed to pulverize documents into unrecoverable dust. But they were also machines. And machines could be overloaded, jammed. The thump was closer now, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. They were in the adjacent room. I had to create a diversion. I grabbed a stack of discarded financial reports from a nearby desk. Thick, glossy paper, hundreds of pages. Not the sensitive stuff, but bulky enough. I ran to the nearest shred bin, lifted the heavy lid, and began feeding the papers in, handful after frantic handful. The shredder roared to life, a hungry, grinding sound that momentarily drowned out the approaching footsteps. I didn't stop, even as the first shadow fell across the doorway. The shredder began to groan, struggling with the sheer volume. Smoke, thin and acrid, began to curl from its motor housing. The machine shuddered, then seized with a final protesting shriek, emitting a puff of black smoke. I turned, my hand instinctively going to the small, weighted object in my other pocket. The figures in the doorway were indistinct, silhouetted against the dim light of the corridor, but their intent was clear. My escape depended on the chaos I had just created. The screen's pallid light still coated my face, a cold mirror to the dread coiling in my gut. Reveal 8 had been a punch to the diaphragm. Active deployment, not just manufacturing. A weapon, not just a product. My fingers, surprisingly steady despite the tremor that threatened to consume my entire frame, hovered over the keyboard. I needed more. I needed Reveal 10. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the server racks behind a locked grate and the almost inaudible whir of the computer's internal fan. Each breath I took felt amplified, a desperate gasp for air in an atmosphere suddenly too thin. The sleek, polished surfaces of the executive desk reflected the dim monitor glow, an endless vista of unfeeling efficiency. My gaze darted to the heavy-gauge shred bins, their slots gaping like hungry mouths, ready to devour any trace of inconvenient truth. The locked safes, built into the wall with their formidable steel doors, seemed to mock my efforts, protecting secrets far deeper than what I'd already uncovered. I navigated the labyrinthine directories with a grim efficiency born of desperation. I bypassed folders titled Logistics, Procurement, and Regulatory Compliance, my focus solely on the deployment subdirectory. There, nestled amongst encrypted files marked Phase Alpha and Contingency Beta, was a single, unadorned file. Operation Chimera, Final Manifest Inc. The name itself, Chimera, sent a shiver down my spine. A mythical beast, a composite of terrifying parts, designed for destruction. It fit perfectly with the insidious nature of what I was uncovering. I entered the decryption key I'd painstakingly extracted from a hidden metadata string in Reveal 8. The progress bar crawled, each pixel a tiny hammer blow against my resolve. My eyes burned, fixed on the screen, willing it to accelerate. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken questions and the palpable weight of impending catastrophe. Finally, the file opened. It wasn't a dense legal brief or a technical specification. It was a ledger, stark and unambiguous. Columns listed dates, coordinates, payload identification numbers, and, most damningly, impact assessment. My gaze snagged on the first entry. Date, 20XX0714. Coordinates, 34.05292 degree N, 118.2437 W, a major urban center I recognized instantly. Payload ID, Chimera 01A. Target, unspecified atmospheric dispersal. Impact assessment, elevated particulate matter. Respiratory distress in vulnerable populations. Initial increase in localized airborne pathogens. Data suppression protocols initiated. Unspecified atmospheric dispersal. Localized airborne pathogens. This wasn't just a product. It was a deliberate biological event. Not a mistake, not an accident. An experiment in a major city. This wasn't just about manufacturing. It was about weaponizing disease, testing it on an unsuspecting population. I scrolled down, my vision blurring at the edges. Entry after entry, each detailing similar horrifying events. Then I found Reveal 10. It wasn't an entry in the ledger itself, but a linked internal memorandum attached to the final entry, dated only a week prior. Memorandum 2. Project Lead, Chimera Operations. From redacted, but the file properties indicated a high-level executive access. Date, 26/10/22. Subject, Phase 4 deployment, final approval. Reference, initial Phase 1-3 efficacy reports. All parameters met or exceeded expectations for environmental dissemination and public health impact. Localized anomalies within acceptable statistical margins. Phase WAFOR, designated Harbinger, is approved for immediate implementation. Target vector identified as the primary municipal water supply of redacted. But the coordinates in the associated ledger entry matched a major port city on the eastern seaboard. Dissemination protocol. Sustained release over a 72-hour period. Expected outcome. Systemic disruption, widespread incapacitation, and long-term epidemiological shift. Confirmation of Harbinger success is paramount for future strategic initiatives. All existing data suppression and public relations contingency plans are to be activated immediately upon initiation of Phase 4. Maintain plausible deniability. No direct forensic links to be permitted. My hands started to tremble, violently this time. Municipal water supply. Sustained release. This wasn't just deployment. This was an act of war aimed at an entire population. And it was happening now. The date on the memo was a week ago. The associated ledger entry indicated the deployment had already begun. They weren't testing a weapon. They were deploying it, full scale, and had been for months, culminating in this final devastating Harbinger phase. The shred bins, the locked safes, the hushed sterility of the offshore law office. It was all part of the impenetrable fortress built around this monstrous secret. I wasn't just looking at evidence of a crime. I was looking at the unfolding blueprint of a catastrophe, one that was already underway. My fingers flew back to the keyboard, a new target in mind. Find the names, find the faces behind the redactions. My hands started to tremble violently this time. A major port city, municipal water supply, sustained release. And it was happening now. The screen still glowed, displaying the chilling schematics of the city's water infrastructure, overlaid with projected dispersal patterns. I slammed the laptop shut, the metallic click echoing too loudly in the small, temporary data hub I'd commandeered. My breath hitched. This wasn't a contained incident. It was a systemic assault. Every second I wasted was a ripple of disease spreading further into the urban fabric. I snatched my jacket, the weight of the evidence in my bag suddenly feeling like a lead anchor. My mind raced, sifting through the fragmented clues, the seemingly unrelated financial transactions, the coded communications. They all pointed to one nexus, the architect of this devastation, the financier. He operated from the shadows, his influence a web of offshore accounts and shell corporations. And I knew exactly where his most sensitive operations were conducted. The The drive was a blur of flashing streetlights and the insistent thrum of the engine. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my jaw tight. The city lights, usually a comforting blanket, now seemed like a vast, vulnerable grid. I pictured the intricate network of pipes beneath them, the silent, insidious delivery system already at work. The thought made my stomach clench. I pulled up to the discreet, almost anonymous building. No grand entrance, just a single heavy glass door that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The security was surprisingly lax, or perhaps, deliberately so, relying on its obscurity. The main entrance was unlocked. I pushed through, the door swinging silently inwards, revealing a reception area bathed in a faint, cool light. No one. The silence was absolute, pressing down on me. The air was sterile, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old paper. I moved through the deserted corridors, my footsteps unnervingly loud on the marble floor. Each office I passed was a replica of the last, sleek, minimalist, and utterly devoid of personal touches. My gaze scanned the nameplates, searching for the one I knew belonged to him. I found it at the end of a long hallway, a simple, engraved rectangle. Chief Legal Counsel. A thin strip of light shone from beneath the door. I pushed the door open. He looked up, his expression calm, almost serene, as if he'd been expecting me. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his tailored suit immaculate. You're quite tenacious. A predictable variable, ultimately. He gestured to the monitors. A predictable outcome, too. The current trajectory is, for what? He leaned back, his gaze unwavering. For clarity, Raj, for a reset. This world, this society, it's overgrown, diseased. It needs pruning. A controlled culling, if you will, to allow for healthier growth. A necessary epidemiological shift to correct the course of humanity. You call this a correction? I pointed to the screens, the rising curves of projected sickness. This is mass murder. A strong word, he countered, unperturbed. I prefer strategic recalibration. The weak will be removed. The strong will adapt, evolve. Think of it as accelerated natural selection, guided by a more discerning hand. My eyes darted around the office. Behind him, against the far wall, stood a row of industrial-grade shred bins. To their left, a massive reinforced safe, its steel door gleaming dully. He was preparing to destroy the final evidence, or perhaps activate something else entirely. You won't get away with this, I said, my voice tight. He chuckled softly. The release is already underway. The first symptoms will manifest within hours. By the time anyone connects the dots, the initial wave will be irreversible. My legal team, operating from this very offshore law office with shred bins and locked safes, has ensured every contingency is covered. Every financial transaction is laundered. Every communication encrypted beyond retrieval. He slowly reached for a small metallic device on his desk, a remote control of some kind. My instincts screamed. This wasn't just about destroying evidence. He was about to trigger something else, something final. What is that? I demanded, taking a step forward. A failsafe, he replied, his thumb hovering over a button. Should my efforts be compromised, this ensures the data, the true scope of the project, is erased from all servers, everywhere. And it also initiates a secondary, more potent dispersal. A final, undeniable statement. He wasn't just destroying evidence. He was escalating the attack. I launched myself across the room, adrenaline surging through my veins. He reacted with surprising speed for a man of his age, his hand darting towards the button. I slammed into the desk, sending papers scattering, my hand snatching for the remote. His grip was surprisingly strong. We wrestled, a silent, desperate struggle for the small device. His calm facade finally cracked, replaced by a flash of anger. My fingers closed around the remote, twisting it from his grasp. He roared, a sound utterly unlike his composed demeanor, and lunged for me. I sidestepped, bringing my knee up sharply. He grunted, stumbling back, clutching his abdomen. Before he could recover, I sprinted towards the reinforced safe. My eyes had caught a flicker on one of the screens. A countdown timer ticking down to 0. The secondary dispersal. The remote was useless now. I needed to stop the source. The safe. I fumbled with the remote, realizing it wasn't for the safe. My gaze landed on a small keycard reader beside the safe door. You can't stop it. I snatched the keycard, my fingers fumbling as I swiped it through the reader. A soft beep echoed in the silent office, and the heavy steel door of the safe swung inward with a faint hiss of hydraulics. Inside, bathed in a soft internal light, was not money or gold, but a complex array of servers and a single glowing red button labeled Deployment Phase 2. The countdown on the screen flashed. 003. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my palm onto the button, not to activate it, but to destroy it. The plastic casing shattered, wires sparking and snapping. The countdown vanished. A heavy silence descended, broken only by my ragged breathing and the financier's choked gasp. He stood frozen, staring at the ruined console within the safe. His grand design, his strategic recalibration, was broken. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. I hadn't called them, but someone else must have connected the dots, perhaps from the data I'd already sent out. The first responders, the real heroes, were coming. My job here was done. The immediate threat was neutralized, the second phase averted. But the city still faced the first wave, the insidious sickness already spreading. The fight was far from over, but at least for now, the bleeding had stopped.